My scripture reading this morning comes from two sources. One is my creation of 4 hymns, parts of them that are appropriate for today, and the other one is a small section from the book of Ether. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea. With a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain. America, America, sweet land of liberty. Does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. And from the first chapter of the book of Ether, the Lord spoke to the brother of Jared and said, I will go before thee into the land, which is choice above all the land of the earth. And of thy seed I will raise up a great nation, and there shall be none greater upon all the face of the earth, free from bondage and captivity, from all other nations under heaven, and serve God, or be swept off when they are ripened in iniquity. Behold, this is a choice land. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. It has been a wonderful morning, well organized, and probably one of the nicest recognition ceremonies I have been a part of. And so those who have any part in that can be happy to know that it's very pleasing to the souls of all those veterans who are gathered today. It is a beautiful day and the eve of a very important day in our history, because we remember literally the millions of people who lost their lives in the conflicts that were about this nation and other nations. We know that from that conflict, this land and this church and this very room are here because of that conflict that came about. For others who wanted to take this land from us, they have never been successful. Those who fought for us are called military veterans. And if they could speak to us today, and we could hear it in this room, they would say together, we did this for you. And if we have to, we will do it again. And it is laying your life on the line in a moment of sacrifice. And it's great courage that inspired those words. You know, veterans come in all sizes. They come in all shapes and colors, and we have men and women that are veterans. Some of them are short, some of them are tall, some of them are young, some of them are old. So the question comes down to the bottom line, what is a veteran? I got into a lot of trouble asking that of a group of elementary students about 15 years ago. It was at CPRS, and I simply asked the question, what is a veteran? Of course, every hand went up. All those children, they have no idea what I just asked them. They don't have any idea about the answer. But one little guy had his hand up a little bit higher. And I said, what is a veteran? And he said, that's what I take my dog to when he's sick. I said, okay. And I went on to something else. And when the little morning program was over with, he came up and he said, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. And he said, I mispronounced. And I said, well, it's okay, it's all right. He said, my dog's doctor is a vegetarian. I had to turn around at that point and walk away because I knew I was going to laugh when this, and I looked at his face and he was serious. But when you look in the dictionary at what the definition of a veteran is, it says this: a person who has served honorably in one of the branches of our armed forces for at least 24 hours. Today, there are about 20 million veterans alive in this country. It changes rather rapidly. For the veterans that are still living, about 600,000 die every year. And that number goes up because the age goes up. Now, if you want to do your math for a daily figure, every day about 1,600 veterans die. And it seems incredible, but it is a figure that we're working with today. Our National Armed Forces honors all veterans on November the 11th. And on the last Monday of May, they call that Memorial Day, and we honor specifically on that day those who have passed away, whether in combat or whether by natural causes and age. And on these dates, we come together and we pay tribute to those who have served our country, especially those whose names we do not know, and we call them the unknowns. This is a day of remembrance for all veterans. At our largest national cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery, all the service branches come together twice a year. They march their platoons up the stairway in front of the amphitheater, and it's quite a show of respect and thank you to the veterans that are represented in the white stones they see in that cemetery, and of course, the unknown soldier, who they don't know who that is, but they pay respect because beyond those three stones that are there representing World War I, World War II, and Korea, there are 5,000 other stones in Arlington alone that are marked unknown soldier for that particular war, whatever that might be. At Arlington, these troops come and give honor to someone they do not know who they are. And I find that an incredible thought when you think about how many cemeteries there are in our country, national cemeteries. There's about 148, and they're all maintained by the National Cemetery Association. And these veterans sometimes buried under white stones, sometimes they're buried together as part of another building that's erected for them and their remains. And the record shows that America has now about 1.4 million veterans buried in different locations. around our country. And the largest, again, is Arlington, and there's about 400,000 graves there. That's counting all of the smaller grave sites and some double grave sites where the veteran, whether it's the man or the woman, is on one side of the white stone and the name is on the other side of the white stone. Jackie's parents are buried that way at Jefferson Barracks. And my heart always swells whenever I think about the tremendous dedication and tremendous sacrifice that they made. And when I think about veteran, I think about sometimes the question came up in one of the chapels I was in, and the question was, what is a hero? What is a hero? And is it the one that has the most medals? And I thought about that for a long time. It might be something else. And I spent a good afternoon researching that very thought and writing some notes down. And it seems that the heroes of the wars sometimes go on to be something greater after that war. If they're a general or a high-ranking officer, a lot of times they become president of the United States. It happened with many of them. But they don't always raise to that level, but they raise to important levels, maybe in industry and other places, because of their notoriety. So I went back and I read the dictionary again. And the definition was a little different for me this time. It says a veteran can be anyone who devotes his or her life or a major portion of it to a cause that has made things better for others. We often say to the veterans, thank you for your service. And there are so many people in this room right now that I could say the same thing to, because you've been involved in something. Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a nurse or a doctor, maybe you've been in some other field, maybe you've been in the classroom in a church and you've taught for several years, and you have by definition become a veteran of that particular position. So when we speak of veterans, I don't know where it got attached to people that were in the military, but it applies to a lot of other people. And so I've tried to take the habit now when I know who I'm speaking to, that when they say, thank you for your service, I say the same back to them. And sometimes they look at me funny, but it is justified, not only by definition, but by what I feel here for the things that they do that I cannot do. And one of those things, we had Danny and Rachel, they have that wonderful talent of, along with others in the congregation here, of standing up and singing and doing a wonderful job. And that's not what I can do. I can't do that, but they can. And when I think about Jackie playing the piano, or anyone playing the piano for that matter, but always Jackie, because I get to hear all these songs before I come here. And I know the order, and I know every one of them. And she practices hard at that, but I've never figured out how you can get one hand to do one thing and another. And it can go this way or that way, and sometimes you're reading words, and sometimes you're looking at notes, and sometimes you have to hit that little pedal on the floor. I have no idea what's going on there. And that's a lot of stuff going on, and I find it just amazing. There's a talent there, and I told her that I thanked her for her service, because I can't do that. A lot of us can't do that, and she's done it for many years. And she has had a grandfather that lived to be almost 100, and he was an elder in the church for 77 years. And he had given a lot of service to the people that he was around in a few congregations that he was pastor at, and very involved in the work of the church. So he becomes something that doesn't happen to a lot of people, but I would say there are those in the congregation here that may be pressing maybe 40 years or 50 years in service to the church, maybe longer, maybe a little shorter, But as long as you're doing that and you've done it for quite a while, you become a veteran of that particular talent because you share it with others and it becomes important. I think back to the time, well, especially World War II, that when the young men and some of the middle-aged men, when I say middle-aged, somewhere in the, not very middle-aged, maybe in the late 20s, 30s, early 40s, but they went off to war. And from some of the places they went off to war from, they were very important. And that was making things like cars and farm implements and things of that nature. Now they needed to make jeeps, and they needed to make tanks and airplanes and boats and all weapons of all kinds and ammunition of all kinds. And guess who was doing all of that? Women. Women were hired by the federal government to take over the manufacturing of those supplies. And they did that for at least 2 or 3 years, as I recall, and they became valuable in service to their country because they worked hard at it and they were good at it. And it was because they made that sacrifice that they had some input into exactly how the end of the war came about. It wouldn't have come about without their help. I know that for sure. So they gave something that was quite amazing. When I was on my honor flight, I was privileged to be able to do that. I met a couple ladies. First I thought they were twins, but they were 2 ladies that had been in World War II. And they about the same size, looked about the same weight, and they were chumming around together. They were from different parts of the country. They just became good friends. And I simply asked the question, what did you do when you were when I was talking with them once, I said, what did you do in the war? And they said, we were map makers. And I said, map makers? And I said, I don't understand that. And they said, well, it's kind of easy. The generals would come into the big office and they'd have this big map. And on that map, there would be things written all over the map about here, who was there, how many they had, and all that kind of thing. And then some things across the bottom. And we had to write all those things down. And then they had to make that map and write all those words down because there's no such thing as a copy machine in the early days of World War II. And they were most of the average age of these girls was about 17. And they were taken out of high schools because they had a record of being able to do good artwork and good writing. And they were taken to headquarters offices quite a ways away from probably where the action is, but not too far because they had to get those maps made and sent out. So there was anywhere from 16 to 20 ladies working in one building making the same copy of the same map with all the instructions on there, handing them out so people could take those and take them out into the field so everybody else knew where everybody else was and how many they had. It was a valuable service. It was something that needed to be done, but not all of us could have done that. It was just remarkable what they did. But again, we can look back and say, teachers, Sunday school teachers, ministers of various callings, music of all types, volunteers such as people come out into the streets and volunteer to do things and help people, especially during times of crisis. We think of police, we think of fire protection. Who in the history of our church can you think of? Now think about this, back on this veteran thing again. Who in the history of our church could be considered a church veteran? Okay, let me name a few. And you know what? I'm not going to name your favorite one. I'm sure that's going to come up after the service. But I'm just going to name a few that come to mind. And these are men and women who dedicated their lives to the church. And for years and years and years, those people served the church for a good reason. They had a good reason. They became veterans by the definition that I read you earlier. Here's a few. Of course, Joseph Smith, and we can look over here and see the brother of Jared, Those closest to the prophet in the early days, Oliver Cowdery and then Martin Harris, Joseph Smith III, J.J. Cornish, Emma Smith, Arthur Oakman, Israel Smith, Alma, and others. I got all the way through that list and I said, what am I missing? Jesus. Jesus was teaching, taught for 3 years, maybe a little longer that we don't have record of, but he was a teacher, he was a leader, and he did good. We know that he did good for everyone that he came in contact with. Even in this day and age, he's making contact through others that are talking about him and what he has said. These were the veterans of the Church of Jesus Christ that God wanted upon this earth. That's a high calling. And whenever you're involved in that type of activity, maybe through ministry or through teaching or doing whatever it is you do that would be helpful to the church, you're helping the Lord move forward. In my military experience, I had some things happen to me when I was stationed at the tomb. And I think that during that period of time, I got a little closer to God than I was when I first started, because there were so many things that became important to me that I never had thought about before. And every time I went out for a walk in front of the tomb, the hour that I was there was never the same as any other hour. It was always just a little bit different in some way. And I can't remember what all those ways were, but it was never a robot's job to do that job, because it was a little bit different. Different time of day, different type of crowd, different type of weather. There was all kinds of things that were going on. And I looked back on that and I thought, when I was a sentinel, some things happened. And some of these things I may have told you already, and I apologize for that, but not apologizing from the standpoint of repetition, but from the standpoint that I like to tell these things because I know that some of them might help you in your process that haven't heard them before. Maybe you'll look at things a little bit different. But when I was walking back and forth, you have a certain routine that you have to go through involving 21 seconds. And I walked to the far end of the mat, and I turned around, and I was looking out over Washington, D.C., and the guard change, of course, was over, and there wasn't anybody there. I was by myself, and didn't even see anybody coming up or talking on the stairs there nearby or whatever. And I went down to the end of the mat, and I went through my routine there and came back down to this end again. And when I got there, there was a couple, an older couple, standing near the chains. And the lady had a little handkerchief that she was wiping on her face here, and the gentleman next to her had his arm around her and holding her up, and she was holding onto the chain. And I turned, I did my little routine, I went down to the other end of the mat, and I said, where did they come from? And it's interesting. So I turned and I went back down to the end of the mat again where I saw the people, and they were not there. I didn't see them leaving by any of the exits. They were just gone again. I thought about that for a long time. And then one day it came to me. I don't know where I was or what I was doing at the time, whether I was asleep or what it was that happened, but those two people had lost a son or daughter in the war, and they never heard anything back from the government other than they might be a prisoner of war, they might be missing in action in some way. We don't have any idea where they are, and we're sorry that we don't have any more for you than that. And so they stood there looking at the tomb for whatever they were looking at, Korea or World War II, I would guess. And there was that possibility within them that if their son or daughter died on a battlefield in France where they took some of the caskets from when they picked the unknowns, just maybe they're buried there. in one of those tombs for World War II. And when you think about that, they had no place else to go that was tied to their son or daughter that would help them to maybe understand what happened to them. And so it broke my heart when I thought about it that way. And I'm sure a lot of people came there, maybe in that time period that I was there, and the same thing went through their minds. Well, walking the mat back and forth for an hour, especially in nice weather like today, not so much on Sundays, but starting tomorrow, the firing parties would be back out in the cemetery, firing over the graves, and you'd hear the buglers playing taps. And in an hour, walking back and forth, you might hear that about 5 times, 4 or 5 times on average. And every time that happened, and I heard taps being played, it affected me here because I've walked between those stones and I've looked at the stones and read the stones and some of the places where they've been buried, newly buried, and the average age in a whole row of white stones is 20, 21 years of age. And I was 19 when I first started working at the tomb, but these were people my age that had lost their life in Vietnam. And it really affected me because I knew that there was no way I could avoid it, because we were right in the middle of the cemetery, and almost in any direction you could hear those shots being fired and the taps being played. Well, on very, very hot summer days, we generally had 4 guys that were walking on any day, and that was good. But if for some reason, because they were on leave or because they were sick, we'd be down to 3, and that was hard. And especially on a 3-day, I would get pretty worn out by the end of the day, along with the other guys, and you're just worn out. You've sweated all day, and it's been hot, and the temperatures on that plaza get really high, and it's hard to get everything ready to go again within a couple of hours so that you go back out and do it all over again, because the rotation is there for 3. And at night when the cemetery closed, instead of 1-hour shifts, we did 2-hour shifts. And they would stay, in the summertime, they'd start at 7 o'clock and they'd go to 9, 9 to 11, 11 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, and then the next group would come that's going to be working there on that particular day. Well, there were times on those nights like that that I just couldn't hardly stay awake. I felt like I could go to sleep standing up, and I could do that for an hour. No, couldn't do that. I caught myself falling over a couple times, but it was hard. I was the only one out there. Now, when you're out there on sentry duty at night, nobody's out there but you and the unknowns. So I started talking to the unknowns. Now, they never answered back. But I went out there and told them about my day. It was to help me stay awake, and I told them about my day and what I had done, and I'm sure if they had any recognition of it, wherever they were, they might have understood that a little bit. And it was hard. It really was hard. And I got to thinking about that here a few years ago, and I thought, oh my, and it gets me when I start to talk about it, but if I was to be lucky enough to either be in paradise or someplace in the holy city, and I met one of these unknowns, and I would finally know his name, and I would want to know all their names of those 3. And it would be just an unbelievable thing for me to actually see and talk with one of the unknown soldiers. So I've got that in the back of my mind someplace that's going to happen. And it'll be a wonderful thing because of just that bond that you feel when you're so wrapped up in everything that's there and surrounding the unknown soldiers. Another thing that was a part of my past, not too distant past now because it was the honor flight, but I'll mention only one thing that was the most impactful. And that is that one of the things in the military that was a highlight for every day, and a lot of you know what I'm talking about when I say this, but all the mail that was brought to the company was just dumped in like a wastebasket or whatever, a big box, and one of the sergeants would go out, stand up on a set of stairs and yell out, "Mail call!" And you'd run out there and you would hope that a letter was coming from home, or maybe a friend, or something, even an ad about something. We know it was just one of those things, and you'd waiting for them to call your name. And sometimes you didn't get anything. And it was a little bit sad, but you were going to be hopeful for the next day. Well, on that plane, on the way home, we were about a half an hour out of Kansas City. The people that were working with everybody on the plane, all 70 of us, they were in the aisle, and they were standing pretty close to being even apart, and they were ready to go, and we didn't know what they were ready to go for, but one of them yelled, "Mail call!" And we all knew what that meant. We all looked around, and so they started handing out these manila bags like this, and they were about that thick, and they were just loaded with cards and letters that the honor flight people got from church groups, schools where they attended, neighborhood, family, jobs that they were a part of, anybody that would want to put a card in there and say thank you for your service. Now, I went to the Sunday school people here, and they were doing some fabulous work one day, and I asked the question, "Do you think you could make me some cards for veterans?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, we can do that. How many do you want?" And I said, "About 70. 70 cards. So they made these cards, and they put it all together, and the people got the cards delivered to them, and I thought every one of them got a folder with one of the cards from the kids from here. And they were happy to do that. And when I was sitting on the plane and I started to look inside, I thought, I can't do this. Because I looked around me, and the guys around me there was tears everywhere, because I know some of those guys had never been to Washington, D.C. And I also know that they probably didn't get much mail, maybe. And this was the biggest thrill for them, this moment, to where they were getting mail, a great big package of mail, and they had been on an honor flight where they had been treated kindly all day long. And it was a big, big thing for them. It was a wonderful thing. And it touched my heart. It touches my heart now just to think about it. 2 Chronicles, the 7th chapter, 14th verse, are words that bring hope and challenge to us. The Lord is speaking here to Solomon. He says, "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land." In our families, in this church, and in this nation, and this world, we need to use whatever time we have for healing and forgiveness, and a time to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, to search for a peace where there is anger or where there is differences of opinion that are really harmful, that we would have a way of helping and correct. And we would hope that those blessings that we might have would be coming from the realms of glory, and that special light that fills our hearts, and the evidence of His majesty everywhere may be seen. And may we find ourselves looking at the face of God in some of the things that we do, not only for now, but for eternity. God wants us to do the right thing And all we have to do is ask about that. He knows that we probably know what the right thing is already, but he's glad that he received a request from you. So I say this morning, beloved, thank you for your service. With all my heart, thank you for your service and your service to God and his country and his church. All forms of veterans like you will never be forgotten as long as you are doing what God wants you to do in recognizing and remembering the veterans of this nation. God bless you, and God bless America.